This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you eliminate chaos and maximize profits on your construction projects. Today, we're going to be talking about how to eliminate customer communication chaos. If you've been around this for a while, you know that it's all about the flow of information, and if you're really busy, like a lot of people are these days, it's just chaos when it comes to customer communication, getting decisions, selections. You have information coming in at all hours of the day, and from phone calls, text messages, emails, Facebook messages, in-person meetings, and it just becomes this ridiculous amount of chaos. So here's what you're going to get out of this, and this is the audio that I've pulled out of a video that I have out that is available over at buildermasterclass.com. Here's what you're going to get. There are a few strategies you can use to eliminate customer communication chaos. Number one is you're going to learn what it means to lead with systems. You're also going to hear about this trap, this thinking trap that you want to stay out of that actually leads to a lot of the chaos that you could be dealing with. You'll learn about a strategy called batching communication that will save you a tremendous amount of time. And then I would also challenge you to think about how you can use batching with your subcontractors and use it with your internal team as well as your customers. And then if you're using a piece of software like CoConstruct, which I highly recommend if you're a builder or remodeler, you can find out more information about CoConstruct over at constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct. If you're using software, then you need to use it like a funnel and less like a filter. And then lastly, one of my favorite strategies that will save you a lot of chaos and a lot of headaches is anchoring. We're going to talk about that. So before we get into those strategies, I have a couple of resources that I want to share with you. First of all, as I mentioned, this is the audio that came out of a video that is currently available over at buildermasterclass.com. If you go there, you can watch the video. You'll also be able to watch another video on preventing change order headaches, as well as a few other resources. You can download an optimize your overhead guide that you can go through and optimize your overhead, reduce risk, streamline your overhead. And then if you want to increase and improve productivity on your job sites, there's a guide there with 32 productivity hacks to boost profitability of your crews. You can check that out. And then here's one more resource. What's holding you back from experiencing hyper growth in your construction business? Likely it's poor cash flow. Happens all the time. Moving money from one project to fund materials for your next. But that's all changing. Build will pay your supplier in cash up front and then extend you 120-day terms. Finally, a pay-when-paid solution for contractors so you can experience the confidence to bid on projects you never thought you could. The folks at Build hear it all the time. I wish I had heard about Build sooner. So what are you waiting for? Head over to build.com/CLE and have your materials funded as quickly as same day. That's BILLD.com/CLE. All right, now let's talk about strategies to eliminate customer communication chaos. Enjoy. I want to give you 4 strategies in this video that you can put to work to eliminate customer communication chaos. All right, so number 1, first strategy is to lead with systems. I had an event a few months ago, and there was a bath and kitchen remodeler named Brian who said this. He said, they're not professional customers. All right, so think about this. Your customers are probably not professional customers. If you think about who's doing this every day, it's you. So you need to lead your customers with systems. Tell them, this is how we do it. Don't let them have it their way. A few years ago, there was a Burger King slogan, have it your way. And you're not Burger King, all right? You're more like Henry Ford, who said you can have any color Model T you want as long as it's black. All right, so you need to lead your customers with systems. Be very specific. This is how we do it. And one of the things you want to get out of is this trap that I see way too many builders and remodelers getting into, which is what I call the as little as possible as late as possible trap. So think about this. Are you getting as little information as late as possible from your customers? Are you waiting until the last possible minute to get selections and specs and decisions and cabinet layouts and flooring selections and things like that, and paint colors? You need to avoid the as little as possible, as late as possible trap, and push these selections and push the information gathering as early as possible. Get as much as possible, as early as possible. That's going to eliminate a lot of the chaos. Chances are you've been in a situation where you got a phone call from your countertop guy or your painter who said, hey, we're going to be there tomorrow. What do you want to do? What are we doing? And that's because you got caught in this as little as possible, as late as possible. So if you use CoConstruct, you are set up with this fantastic system to capture all of this information. And all you need to do is push the information gathering to the front of the project. So instead of waiting as late as possible, push all of those selections to the front. So think about this. When is the worst time to get a selection or a decision from your customer? It's probably when you need it right now, right? When you get that phone call from your painter or your tile guy or your flooring sub saying, hey, what are we doing? We're on site. What are we doing right now? That's the worst time to get a selection. The second best time to get a selection is right after you sign the contract. Weeks before, maybe months before you actually need the information. That's the second best time to get the information. And you may be wondering, well, when's the first best time to get all of that information? I'll talk about that a little bit later in this video. So how do you do this? Well, one of the first things you can do is put selection dates on your schedule. You need to have a project schedule, and you can create tasks on your project schedule. Select windows, confirm exterior siding selections, verify layout. Customer approvals and decisions are critical path items that need to be on your schedule. So put those tasks on your schedule, assign those tasks to your customer. That way, if they slip, you can show them that there's an impact to their schedule if they don't make decisions in a timely manner. So once you get those dates on the schedule, communicate those deadlines early and often. Communicate those deadlines early and often. As I like to say, preach those deadlines. Tell your customers, hey, this decision is coming up in a month. This decision is coming up in 2 weeks. This decision is coming up next week. We need that decision this week. Preach those dates and boil it down to answer 2 questions for those people. They're wondering 2 questions. They're wondering, what do I have to do and when do I have to do it? What do I got to do and when do I got to do it? So if you can answer those 2 questions for your clients, you're going to help them make timely decisions. You're going to help yourself. And then I'm going to show you this graph. Let me show you this graph. If you want to help explain to your clients, why is it so important to make decisions up front? Look at this graph. One of the lines shows the opportunity for changes over time. So at the beginning of the project, you can see that there's lots of opportunity. During the design phase, we can move lines around on paper, we can change material selections, no problem. As the project progresses, at some point things become impossible. The other line shows the effect on price as time goes on. And as you can see, cost goes up exponentially as time goes on. This is why it's so expensive to add an electrical outlet after the walls are painted, right? Maybe you've had this conversation with a client. Why is it so expensive to do this? What do you mean I can't add this? Well, there are certain things that just become impossible or extremely expensive. So you can show them this simple graph to help explain to them why it's so important to make decisions on the left side of this graph during the planning, during the design phase. And that's going to eliminate a lot of your chaos. So number 1 is to lead your customers with systems. Number 2 is to use this strategy that I shared with a custom home builder named Jeff, who's in Ontario. He was spending all of his time. He was on the phone, answering texts, Facebook messages from clients, all hours of the day, from early in the morning, even at night. He had a wife and 2 young kids, and he was answering text messages, and he felt like he was chained to his phone 18 hours a day, and he felt this need to respond to customers all the time. Maybe you feel that way. Maybe you hate your phone. Maybe when you see the phone ring or you see a text message, you're like, oh, it's this guy again, or it's this lady again. Don't they know I have a life? Don't they know, like, they would never do this to their accountant. They would never do this to their attorney, etc. So again, let's lead with systems. And one of the best systems is to batch communication. Batch communication. Instead of operating like a call center where you have to pick up the phone and answer, you want to batch communication and communicate at certain times of the day, at certain times of the week, and get in front of the communication instead of reacting to the communication. So what you can do is to, again, remember those 2 questions that customers are asking: what do I got to do? When do I got to do it? And then there probably are some other questions that they're asking. Hey, what's going on my project right now? What's coming up? Are there any issues, etc.? And answer those questions proactively. So put together a weekly update and send out a weekly report or a weekly communication and tell them, set this expectation. We're going to talk about expectations in a minute, but set the expectation on Sunday night or on Monday night, whatever it is. You're going to receive a weekly update. You're going to get a report. You're going to get some pictures. You're going to get a list of the upcoming tasks that need to happen over the next 2 weeks. And get in the driver's seat and tell them, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to do. Here's what we did this past week. Here's what we're doing in the upcoming week. And then set that expectation, which we'll talk about in a few more minutes. And communicate. So when they do send you a text message or an email, hey, what about this? What about this? You train them to say, I'll answer that. Or we're going to cover it. We've already covered that in the report we sent out a couple of days ago, or we'll cover that in the next report. So send them to the communication that you're doing on a regular basis. And if they need a little more care and feeding than the typical customer, then you can have a meeting or have a call. Set up a weekly Zoom call and say, you send out the report, let's say on a Monday night. You tell them we're going to have a weekly coordination call on Tuesday afternoon. The expectation is you're going to review, you as the builder or the remodeler, you're going to send out the report on Monday night. Their expectation is that they're going to review it and you can answer questions about that on a weekly basis. Then when they say, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with this? You don't have to respond to that. You can say, we'll cover that in the next call. So batch communication. Instead of having 14 text messages over a 3-day period, you just lump all of that time together and batch it into one time, okay? Number 3, this one is actually had a mastermind group call with a bunch of CoConstruct users about this topic. How do we manage customer communication? And after 35 or 40 builders broke out into small groups and talked about it, the consistent feedback was we've got to use CoConstruct more like a funnel and less like a filter. Let me say that again. The key to eliminating customer communication chaos is to use CoConstruct as a funnel instead of a filter. Let me explain. Think about a filter. A filter catches some things, but it lets a lot of stuff go through. It catches certain things that you want to filter out, but it lets a lot of stuff go through. And maybe you're using CoConstruct to communicate with your clients more like a filter. It catches certain things, but a lot of stuff's going through. Therefore, you still have to have phone calls and text messages, and you're getting all of this stuff. So the consistent feedback after these 35 or 40 builders broke out into their groups, talked about communication was, we have to run 100% of all customer communication through CoConstruct. We have to use it like a funnel where every communication goes through CoConstruct. That was the key. So you may be thinking, how in the world do I do that? Well, you put it in your contract. Very simply, you put it in your contract, and then you set the anchor, which we'll talk about in the next point. So if you're wondering, okay, that sounds great, but what do I actually put in my contract? Well, below this video is a link. You can actually download a Word document that some builders use to set the expectation and actually set the legal framework with their customers that every bit of communication is going to go through CoConstruct. So you can just copy and paste this language. There's also some language around selections and change orders that you can just copy and paste into CoConstruct. So put it in your contract, funnel everything through it. And you may be wondering, like a lot of people, what do I do if they call me or they send me a text message or they send me an email outside of CoConstruct? Well, you gently guide them back into your funnel, which is CoConstruct. And you respond. If they send you a text message, you copy and paste that text message into the appropriate spot in CoConstruct, and you respond that way. And you lead them back to your system, which is CoConstruct. Okay? Again, if you want to download some language that you can copy and paste to put in your contract, there's a link below this video. You can do that. The fourth strategy to eliminate customer communication chaos is to set an anchor. Anchor them on expectations upfront, early. All right? You may be wondering, what's anchoring? Well, anchoring is a negotiation tactic. It's actually a psychological principle that says we put, well, let me give you an example of how you may have anchored yourself. Maybe you've had a conversation with someone and they said, hey, Todd, give me a ballpark price to do this. And they have no scope, they have no drawings, they have no anything. It's just back of the napkin type sketch. And you give them this highly qualified answer and say, well, I think it's going to be around $75,000, but, and then you list all these qualifications. They decide to move forward. And at some point, months or weeks down the road, you come back and say, hey, after we've designed it, after you've doubled it in size, it looks like it's going to be about a $125,000 project. And they say, but you said it was going to be $75K. That was an anchor. You just anchored yourself. So anchoring is this tendency that all humans have to put way too much emphasis, a disproportionate amount of emphasis on the first piece of information we hear. So if you want to manage communication, if you want to lead your customer, take the opportunity at the beginning of the project and set some anchors that you're going to go back to and remind them of. So set anchors. Here are a few expectations you want to anchor them to. Number one, that selections will be made as early as possible. We're not going to wait until the last minute. This graph that we showed you that explains why things are so expensive and so hard to change after the fact is why we need to make selections up front. So you can say things like, it's going to seem like we're going to flood you up front with a bunch of decisions, and we are. And here's why. So you just set that anchor. We will need a lot of information up front. It's going to seem like it's way too early. You're going to think, why do we need to decide the flooring before we even pour the foundations? Or why do we need to decide the countertops before we even start demo? This is why. You just set the expectation. You've anchored them to that expectation. Number two, communication. Set the expectation up front. You will receive a weekly update. We will have a weekly call. When you call, when you text, then we're going to say, we'll cover it later. If it's an emergency, we will respond, okay? But all communication will go through CoConstruct. You can set that expectation. It's not enough just to put it in your contract. You need to point it out. Hey, here's what's going to happen. If you send us an email, we're going to respond through CoConstruct. If you send us a text message, we're going to copy and paste it, and we'll respond through CoConstruct. You're going to set that expectation. And then while you're at it, let's talk about hours of communication. If you don't want people to call you or text you at 7:15 p.m. while you're at your kid's soccer game or you're watching Grey's Anatomy, then set that expectation. We will not respond after 5 p.m. If it's an emergency, call us, but do not call us after 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. Whatever it is, you set that expectation and set that anchor. We will not respond. Don't even call us unless it's an emergency. Think about what are some other expectations. You've got this opportunity to set anchors up front. And again, we had a mastermind call with some other CoConstruct builders, and I asked this question: what are some other expectations that you want to anchor your customers to up front? And here are a few of the responses. Number one was from a custom home builder who said, people aren't going to be at your job every day. So if you don't see somebody at your project, at your job site, don't be alarmed. There will be gaps in the schedule. So if that's an issue, set that expectation early. You may want to set the expectation who to communicate with or whom to communicate with, and tell them, don't communicate with our trade partners. Don't communicate with people at the job site. If you have an issue, you have to go through CoConstruct. So who should they communicate with? Who are they not communicate with? You may even want to go as far, if you're say a spec home builder, and say you're not allowed on the job site. Okay? Maybe a lot of your problems come from customers who go out to the job site every day and then they inundate you with questions and problems the next day. So think about this. How much time are you spending chasing information from your clients? How much time are you in crisis mode trying to track down a client, trying to put together some selection because you've gotten yourself into the trap of getting as little information as late as possible? How many hours a day are you spending responding to phone calls and texts and Facebook messages and Instagram messages and who knows what else? How much time are you spending doing that? And then how many details are still getting missed? How much rework are you doing? How many uncomfortable conversations are you having with customers because something got missed? And then how much is that costing you? How much profit is that bleeding? And maybe there is a financial component, but maybe there's also this non-financial component where it's just frustrating to always feel like you're chasing your tail like this hamster on a wheel that you just can't get off. Now, let's imagine a situation where you can actually get work done. You can go for hours, a couple of hours at a time without constant interruptions. What if you had just a few more hours a week because you've eliminated some of this chaos? What would you spend that time on? If you had, say, 2 hours a week, what would you spend that time on for your business? Maybe you would spend time planning. Maybe you could plan further in advance, put together schedules and identify tasks and hand off your projects better to your trade partners and your folks in the field. If you had that time to do the planning, how many mistakes would that avoid? Maybe you would spend time scheduling. Maybe you would spend those few hours a week selling or building your trade partner network, putting systems in place. But think about that. What would you do if you had a few hours a week that were freed up because you were no longer dealing with customer communication chaos? Well, if that sounds good to you, then in a moment, you're going to hear from a custom home builder named Dan Duvall. But before we do that, let me just review these 4 strategies you can use. You can put these to work right now. If you use CoConstruct, it's already baked in. There's just some things that you need to put into place. And frankly, if you don't use CoConstruct yet, then you can also use these strategies as well. So number 1 is lead your customers with systems. Push decisions to the front. Avoid the as little as possible, as late as possible trap. Number 2 is to batch communication. Don't operate like a call center. Batch your communication into set timeframes. Number 3 is run all communication through CoConstruct. Use CoConstruct less like a filter and more like a funnel. Don't just use it to catch some things, use it to catch everything. And then number 4 is to anchor your expectations up front. Set the anchor, set the expectations early, and then preach those expectations early and often. So as I mentioned, Dan Duvall recently went through the CoConstruct Masterclass. And when I asked him the question, what would you tell builders and remodelers and CoConstruct users who are thinking about it, who want to solve these same problems, what would you tell them about the Masterclass? And here's what he said.
Sure thing. So I'm Dan Duvall. We own our company as Daniel Duvall Custom Builder, and we're located in Bellbrook, Ohio, which is just south of Dayton. We build custom homes, all pre-sold, square footage wise, anywhere from maybe 6,000 to 12,000 square feet, something like that. All very detailed, very custom.
And how long have you been doing this?
Sure. So we're actually celebrating our 25th year this year of home building.
Now that you've gone through the entire 6-week masterclass, what did you like the most about the masterclass?
Probably the 2 things that I took too quickly. And the one I really implemented quickly was probably one of the simpler ones, which was the MIT, most important things. And, focusing on the most important thing. And that could mean a lot of different things. But for me, it meant sitting down the week prior and planning my next week out the following week and just focusing on that. And then, of course, the right to left thinking that was part of the class was outstanding.
What surprised you about the class, if anything?
Quite frankly, it was the combination of you and Spencer. We had two different kind of mindsets there. You're both very detailed, uh, very process oriented, and can see the big picture of the construction, every industry very well. But we were mostly home builders in this one. I think I really liked, how you would speak. You had your process there, and then Spencer would switch over at some point and say, "Hey, here's the concept we're talking about this week. The most important things are the right to left. Here's how it works in co-construct. Here's how we're going to implement it in co-construct." And that's what made this class unique. It was directly to co-construct users, and that's the software that we all use every day to better ourselves.
If somebody called you and said, "Hey, Dan, I'm thinking about signing up for this masterclass. Why should I sign up for it?" What would you tell them?
I'd say I'd say if you want to be a builder that's going to make it in this modern world, you got to stay ahead of the game. All right. You got to stay ahead of the curve. Even if you gleaned 20% of it, it's a huge win.
Hmm.
All right. There was a massive amount of information there. It's like, telling a friend about it, I said, it was so much information. Like, I'm going to have to go back and keep watching the videos to keep pulling it back out. It was great.
What do you think you might be able to achieve now that you've gone through this course? In other words, how will business be different for you?
So, for us, the big thing that we're going to pounce on quickly is locking down our costs with our subs and vendors
Hmm.
through the purchase orders. All right. Controlling the costs on the jobs through purchase orders. Co-construct does a great job of it. We kind of dabble in it a little bit, but now just going through this class and seeing the process clearly, and then I forget, it was one of the last modules I think you talked about. Spencer actually went through the purchase order system.
Mhm.
It just clicked. So that's what we're going to lock down. I mean, I even liked the platform. I liked the structure of it. I liked that it was 6 weeks long. I liked that you had all these modules. You had tons of stuff to do in between, and I liked it a lot. You know what? I mean, if you did another master class, I would sign up.
Okay, so earlier I mentioned that the second best time to get all of the selections on your project was right after you sign the contract. And that might surprise you. When is the first best time? When is the best time to get all of those selections made? And then what about change orders? Because this is a big deal with customer communication. We talked about setting expectations, communicating details. What about change orders? Well, I don't have time to cover all of that in this video. There are a couple of other videos that are coming out where I'll discuss that. So speaking of those videos, here's what I've put together. There are a few other videos just like this. So if you got some value out of this one, there are a few other big topics that I want to cover for you. Number one is solving your change order problems. How can you prevent change order problems? How do we actually prevent change order problems from doing that? How do we set up our subcontractor or trade partner program? There are several key elements that need to be in place to do that. We'll also talk about one of the biggest profit bleeds that is actually a hidden profit bleed that doesn't show up in your bank account and you'll never get an invoice for it, but it could be hammering your bottom line, and then how to eliminate it. Keep an eye out for those videos. They'll be available very shortly. They might be available right now. Take a look around. And if you would like details on the Co-Construct Masterclass and also hear from dozens of other builders and remodelers, Co-Construct users, just like yourself maybe, and what they would tell you about it, then click on the button below this video or the link on this page to get more details on the Co-Construct Masterclass. Are you preparing to purchase materials? Why would you settle for 30-day terms or worse, no terms at all, when you can have 120-day terms with any of your suppliers? Finally, a finance partner built for contractors. Learn more at build.com/CLE. That's BILLD.com/CLE. All right, to check out this video and the other videos that are available, go to buildermasterclass.com. Also, if you're a builder or remodeler and you want to eliminate profit bleeds in your business, for that matter, if you're a general contractor, whether you use CoConstruct or not, then I would encourage you to check out the CoConstruct Masterclass. It's a 6-week-long masterclass on maximizing your bottom line profitability. You'll learn advanced strategies on how to drive your project schedules, how to eliminate unsolicited charity, how to maximize productivity at the job site, how to optimize your overhead, and one of the most important ones is how to sell more work at higher margins. So if you're really busy, but you're not keeping as much of the profit as you feel like you should, then go check this out over at buildermasterclass.com/co-construct. Enrollment will only be open for a short time, and then we're going to kick this thing off. As always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you could take a moment and leave a rating and or a review on the podcast player that you're listening to this on, that would mean a lot to me. That helps get the word out there to other folks. And if there's somebody else that you know that would get some value out of this, maybe they're overwhelmed with customer communication chaos, send them a text, send them an email, and say, hey, you need to check out this podcast. As always, I appreciate it. You can find me at buildermasterclass.com or constructionleadingedge.com. Thank you so much. I'll catch you next time.